Thank you for watching the Broadway Drumming 101 YouTube channel. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click on that bell icon so that you'll be notified when a new video is released. Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101 with my guest, Bill Lanham. Thank you for coming, Bill.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
I'm glad you can join me. I have so many questions to ask you, but the first thing I'd like to ask is, where are you from?
Originally from Lindenhurst, Long Island. Lindenhurst is a town on the border of Nassau and Suffolk, South Shore of Long Island. If you've heard of Amityville, which many people have heard of Amityville because of the movie, it's two towns away from Amityville, which is where my mother grew up. My mother grew up in the town of Amityville. My father grew up in the town of Lindenhurst, and they met and they settled in Lindenhurst, and that's where I'm from.
So, Amityville, is that true? The Amityville horror?
It's what happened in the house with the first. I didn't see any of the movies because I'm not into that kind of thing.
Okay.
But I didn't. What happened in the house was a true story. Long story short, a man, or actually it was the son of a family, he shot his whole family.
Wow.
And there were stories of, voices told him to do it, and things were flying around in rooms, blah, blah, blah. And hence, I believe that's what the first movie was made about. And then, of course, the whole series kind of went on. But yes, true story. It was in the papers. It was, I think, yeah, actually, I was going to name names, but I shouldn't name names. But anyway, yeah, the story was in the paper about the family and what went on. And yeah, you can Google it, look it up, and yeah.
Interesting. Did you start? When did you start playing drums? Was it when you were in elementary school, in middle school, high school?
Yeah, I started playing drums in elementary school. Obviously, before that, buckets and all that stuff. But come from a musical family. Mom's a classically trained pianist. Dad is a vocalist who came from a family of vocalists. And his oldest brother was a jazz piano player who played with Art Blakey. So, music kind of was in the genes. So, yeah, started taking formal lessons on drums in fourth grade. Actually started on piano like a year earlier, and then started taking formal drum lessons fourth grade. And then, stuck with it. And I was fortunate enough to be in a high school. Lindenhurst High School had a great music department.
Were you in the marching
jazz band? Sorry?
Were you in the marching band?
Oh, yeah. I was about to say that. Great jazz, great music department, marching band, and I should say jazz band, and the marching band. We competed. We had a guy. Our music director there. He was heavily into marching band. So we competed. We competed against other schools. We would march in parades. We would go in competitions. We would travel. Tri-state area. A couple times we went out of state, Washington, D.C., various places. So yeah, we marched. Marching band season started for us in high school in August. We went to band camp for 2 weeks in August. We learned our show, or what would be our halftime show for our local football teams, which is where we would kind of use that for practice. And then on other weekends, we would travel to other schools that had competitions and so forth. And we went, I would say August through first couple of weeks of November. And I remember being at some marching band competitions, and it was freezing out there. And oh man, trying to play drums with without gloves, or sometimes they would let us wear like gloves that would match our uniforms, and that would be kind of cumbersome, especially if you're playing snare drum or something that required some more technical proficiency than either playing cymbals or bass drum, So,
are your parents still around?
No, unfortunately not. Mom passed away about 10 years ago, and Dad passed away in 1980. So
yeah, I was wondering if they wound up being professional and
My dad and his brothers, they had a doo-wop group when they were younger, and they actually, they had cut some records. They performed, they cut records. I actually have a CD of a compilation of some of the recordings that they did along with some others who were on the record label that they were on. They were on if you're familiar with old Bugs Bunny cartoons, everything was Acme, Acme this, Acme that, Acme
Dynamite.
soap, Acme Dynamite. Yeah. So they were on a label called Acme Records, which was based on Long Island, with a bunch of other groups. And about maybe 20 years ago, or maybe 25 years ago, a guy put out a CD, the best of Acme Records, and about 4 or 5 of their cuts are on it. And,
Oh wow!
Yeah, my uncle, who was the lead singer in the group, Richard Lanham, is still alive, and he lives in Manhattan. Still performs. He actually did probably the most professional performing out of all my dad's uncles, out of all my dad's brothers. He did a lot of off-Broadway stuff. He toured with the Ink Spots, Harry Belafonte, and bunch of club dates. And yeah, so he has been and still is, to whatever extent he can, a working vocalist. So mom never played professionally. She ended up becoming she also majored in geography and elementary ed. So she was a school teacher for most of her professional career. But she always, her piano playing was great. She played great piano.
Did you ever play with them?
I never played with them. No, you mean my father's group?
Yeah.
No, because of the age factor. By the time they stopped performing, I probably wasn't even born yet. And I never played with them. I did get a chance to hear them sing one night at my uncle's house. They all kind of gathered there and did just jammed one night. I was like, wow, all my uncles are singing. So, and I actually have done gigs with my uncle, who was a singer. I've done gigs with him and performed with him. So, yeah.
When you were growing up in high school, junior high, who were some of your musical influences? Like either musical other than your like family. Did you have other musical influences, and who were some of your drumming influences?
I'll start with drumming influences. I listen to everybody, from the rock guys to the R&B guys to the jazz guys, Steve Ferroni, Steve Gadd, Jeff Porcaro, Alex Acuna, Elvin Jones, Steve Smith, Steve Gadd, if I didn't mention him yet.
You sound like me. People ask me, I mentioned Steve Gadd, Steve Smith, Steve Ferroni. It's like, what would Steve?
Yeah, all the Steves of drumming. Steve Jordan, there was a guy named Steve Schaefer, studio guy. He was great. I mean, lots of guys. And then musically growing up, I listened to a lot of what my father listened to. My father liked to listen to a lot of, obviously, the vocal groups, Ink Spots, Temptations, Four Tops, He also liked a lot of, at the time, you would call it instrumental rock or jazz. So like Chicago, what else he would listen to? So many different things from different genres that were just influential. He listened to a lot of Brazilian stuff. So influences came from everywhere. They came from all those things that were played in the house, and also the things that I like to listen to. So yeah, there was numerous influences.
In high school, did you participate in any kind of battle of the bands? Were you in like rock bands, funk bands, any of that stuff?
I was in it was kind of more of a rock, I'd say a pop rock band. And we didn't really compete. we ended up doing a lot of gigs because we kind of covered a lot of different things. We played some Leonard Skinner. We played some disco. We played some R&B. We played a little bit of everything. So a lot of times we would get hired to do, let's say, a school function. You know, we did a couple of homecomings. We did a couple of graduation parties, stuff like that. You know, so there was always, you know, we did a lot of gigs like that, and so we never really competed because we were kind of the only band that could cover like a bunch of different things. You know, what
was the name of the band?
Oh, wow. The name of the band. You know what? That's a good question, Clay. What was the name? The band never had an official name because of the fact that it was, there was, some people actually asked us on the gigs, hey, what's the name of your band? And we were like, we don't have a band. So our lead singer's name, her name was Joan Paul. So someone said, oh, call the Joan Paul band, you know. And then there were two brothers in the band whose last name was Stephen. So they call it the Stephen Brothers Band, you know. So we actually never really came up with a name, you know. It was just kind of like, oh, let's hire these guys, you know. So
Joan Paul.
And actually the other band I played in, this was more of an R&B group. We were called Natural High. And we played a lot of R&B, and one of the groups we played a lot of Brothers Johnson, and we played a lot of Slave stuff, you know.
Yeah, Slave. Now we're talking.
Slide, you know, and all that.
Oh man, I didn't think anybody else but me likes.
Yeah, baby, you know, you know.
I used to love Slave, man. Go ahead. I'm sorry,
man. That's so bad. I'm gonna have my grandmother check that out. Remember that? Remember that line and slide? That's so bad. I'm gonna have my grandmother check that out.
The whole that toy horn thing.
The
bicycle horn.
Right. Those guys, man. The bass player in that group, his name was Mark Adams. Oh my,
no joke.
Oh my goodness, all his stuff was, and he was like, I think he was like a teenager in the group when the rest of the guys were like in their like mid 20s or late 20s or something like that. Yeah, he was.
I heard they did that song Slide in one take. That was the first take that they did.
Really?
And if you hear it, you know, it starts out one tempo, but it winds up at another. But still, it's song, and it's raw.
Yeah.
Drag.
Yeah. Drag. My name is Drag. Here I come, baby. I ain't gonna bite you. I'm gonna let you hang on. All right. Yeah, right.
Oh man, my favorite album from them was Stone Jam, though. Came out in 82, 81.
Okay.
But anyway, enough about me.
Okay.
This is about you. So, did you go on to college after high school?
I did. Went to college at local Long Island University out on Long Island as a computer science major.
Really?
Yep. I was computer science major, music minor, because mom was a school teacher, and she said, you know, you want to have something to fall back on. And last year of high school, I was in the computer club, and I really liked it. I was like, wow, this is cool. I said, but I don't want to give up music. So she go, well, why don't you try majoring in computer science? And I was like, okay. So I majored in computer science. And after my first semester, I hated it. However, actually my first two semesters, I was like, this is not for me. But I kind of still liked it. There was something about it that I did like, you know, so I kind of stuck with it for a minute. But I was also, when I went to school, I was heavily involved in, even though I was a music minor, I was heavily involved in the music department. So I was in the concert band, I was in the chorus. And then I found out that they were giving scholarships to people, or, you know, partial scholarships to people who were in the chorus or band. So I was like, I said, maybe I'll audition. So then I auditioned. So they gave me some money. And then I joined some performing groups. And by joining performing groups, I got some more money. So yeah, I did probably more musical activity in college than I did computer work, even though I did my computer work because I had to. Because that was my major. I did the music stuff because that's what I wanted to do. That's what my passion was. So, And so, yeah, so long story short, I went to college, and the choral director there, he was and is a great musician, Alexander Dashnar, great musician, and as were all the teachers there. But he specifically, I really bonded with him. He was the director of the chorus and of the chamber singers, which was a group I was in. We did a lot of classical, magical kind of stuff, but his musicianship was like just amazing. And I learned so much from him in terms of just being a musician, in terms of, when you see something that says piano, make sure it's soft. And when you have a crescendo, make sure, and he was just, he was all about the music, and he was all about making music, watching the conductor. If the chorus, and he would embarrass us. He would say, if you guys don't watch me, I will embarrass you right here on the stage, and don't think I won't do it, because I've done it before. And when people were like buried in their music, and because maybe they didn't know the music well enough and they were buried in their music, and he was conducting, okay, and he would change a tempo, and then you would look up and you would be like, where's one? Where's two?
Oh, no.
And he would do it on stage, because he was that serious about, make sure you watch me. If you don't watch me, I'm running the show here. Make sure you watch me, because I will embarrass you. And he did that as a way of teaching us to make sure, okay, it's okay to look at your music. Obviously, not everything's going to be memorized, but make sure you're also, you're checking in and seeing what's going on. And I learned so much from him in terms of just making sure that you're in tune with the conductor, and making sure, it's all right to read the music, but make sure if something's coming up where something might change, or you feel something's going to be a little different, you got to maybe take your eyes out of the music and and you may have to guess at what you're playing, but make sure you're with him, because something might be going on. So anyway, he was a great musician. I learned so much from him. And he actually sometimes would hire, or would use faculty and hire people to play with the chorus. If we were doing something, let's say we were doing Handel's Messiah or something like that, he would hire an orchestra, and so when I learned that he was doing that, I went up to him. I said, hey, listen, Professor Dashnar, I know I'm in the chorus. I said, but I would really love to play this timpani part, or I'd really love to play this, snare drum part, and if you're hiring an orchestra. He says, okay, I'll keep you in mind. And he did that a couple of times where he hired an orchestra. He says, okay, I have a timpanist, and he'd say, okay, yeah, you don't have to sing, I want you to play timpani. And I'd be like, great, and so it was a great experience, because I got a chance as a college student to sing, obviously with the chorus, but also got a chance to play with other professionals, and it was that style, that discipline I was able to get and learn. So that was a nice experience.
So you were a computer science major in the early 80s,
yep.
But you were passionate about music, and all of your efforts went towards music in college. Did you wind up getting a degree in computer science?
Got my degree in what was called communication sciences, which is basically what the computer science program was. I got my degree in that, but then I got my music minor. But then I went back to grad school and did music ed, and pursued just getting my degree in education as well. So I got my bachelor's in the computer world, so to speak, or communication sciences, and I got my master's in music ed. So,
did you eventually go into teaching?
I actually, it's funny, I fell into a couple of teaching positions. When I was student teaching, I fell into a position. I was student teaching with another drummer friend of mine who taught in the Amityville School District. His name is Everett Collins. He was the drummer. He was a drummer for the Isley Brothers, touring drummer for the Isley Brothers, who also went to the same. Isley Brothers and Everett also went to the same college I went to, CW Post, Long Island University. Anyway, and he's an old family. He's family friend from way back. So I student taught with him in Amityville for a month, and the chorus teacher who they had just hired got another job. And so she left. And so they asked me after 1 month of student teaching to take over her courses and her classes for a couple of weeks. So I said, all right. And they asked Everett, hey, can you handle it? He said, yeah, he can handle it. So I did that for a couple of weeks. So I was student teaching and getting paid, which was kind of cool. And it really helped me get my piano chops together too, because I had to kind of, somewhat accompany the chorus. So I was, use my limited skills on mallets to kind of play on the piano, at least chords and stuff. So I did that for a couple of weeks, and then they were interviewing people and said, oh, we don't like this person. We don't like this person. Said, well, Al, can you stay on for another couple of weeks? Sure, no problem. And then at the end of my student teaching, they said, would you like to stay on for the rest of the year as a permanent sub? And I said, sure. So I said, okay. So I stayed on for the rest of the year as a permanent sub, teaching 2 courses and general music, and then was officially offered that position the following school year, and started the year again at that school. And then that was the year that I also by that point was doing some subbing on Broadway. I was subbing on shows and stuff, playing drums. And at that point, I got the call to go on the first national tour of Les Miserables as the drummer.
Before we go into that,
yeah,
you finished grad school, then you decided to move to New York.
I was already in New York because Lindenhurst. I was living on Long Island. Lindenhurst, the town I grew up in, is a city on Long Island. So I was already in New York. So I mean, like I was in New York.
You just commuting back and forth.
Yeah, commuting back and forth on the train. Okay. On the train, it's maybe about an hour outside of town.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, I was. Sorry.
You didn't move into the city at all. You were just going back and forth.
No, yeah, I never moved into the city, so to speak. I was living in Suffolk County, but the commute was fine. I could do that, so it wasn't a big deal.
So yeah. What got you into doing shows?
The first, I started doing a lot of community theater when I was in college. That was one of the things I did that kind of, like I said before, I was doing a lot of music stuff when I was in college, and was doing a lot of community theater. So doing a lot of shows that were in community theaters, and name got around, hire Bill for this, hire Bill for that, and then my name, I started, getting a lot of work there. And then I started taking lessons with a guy in New York who was doing a lot of shows. I started taking timpani lessons from him. And we built up a relationship, and he was doing some shows. He said, why don't you come down and sit in the pit with me here? So I started sitting in pits and watching him, meeting some people. And then through him, I started subbing on some shows, and then some shows on Broadway, and then, started doing the Broadway thing.
What was the first show that you subbed on?
The first show I subbed on was a show called Song and Dance, which was an Andrew Lloyd Webber show, initially starring Betty Buckley, initially starring Bernadette Peters, but then Betty Buckley came in at the end when I subbed on it. So funny thing about that with me was I subbed on it once, and then the show closed like a couple of weeks later, Yeah. I was like, yeah. So anyway,
I know things were a lot different when you first started subbing from the way they are now, as far as technology. And I was just thinking about this right before I was going to interview you. The whole thing about watching the conductor, it's one of the most important things about either subbing on a show or just playing a show. It's probably the thing that everyone should be aware of and should know. Back when you first started, did they have a conductor cam?
Nope. No conductor cam. Back in the day, which is like late, late 80s, mid to late 80s. You'd go in, you would bring your Sony Walkman cassette recorder, record the show. That would be your practice tape. Record that show, and then basically you would take as many notes as you could on. And you would make a photocopy of the book of the part, and you would make as many notes as you could. Oh, the conductor gives a downbeat here, or he subdivides here. But stuff is, it's only so much you can write down as something is going on in performance. If you're at rehearsal, then you can kind of, sketch stuff in. But in performance, it's like you only get so much, So you would rely a lot on your notes and also talking to the player you're subbing for. Hey, how does the conductor conduct this measure? Are there subdivisions? Are there, where does he retard? Where does he cut off? All that stuff. So there was no video. So you would go back numerous times to watch. My policy was always, and my policy still is to watch at least 3 or 4 times. If not, I would sometimes go watch 5 times, 6 times, because there was no video, there was no conductor cam, Nowadays, you have people making conductor videos, which is great, which is really helpful, Not only you may not have to go back as many times, but then now you can rewind and you can see all those details that you would need to play the drum book or play any book, so that you would know what the conductor is doing. So yeah, no conductor videos back in the late 80s and so forth.
So after you were subbing around a little bit, you said you went out on tour.
Yeah. And
that was with Les Mis?
Yeah, I went out on the first national tour of Les Miserables. Yeah. So
what was that experience like?
That was nice. That was a back then, and I don't know if they describe them the same way anymore, but they had national tours and bus and truck tours. So bus and truck tours were tours that did like 1 weekers, sometimes even like maybe like 2 dayers, like, oh, I'm gonna be in some small town in Omaha for two nights, then we're gonna move to somewhere else in Montana for 3 nights. I was on a national tour, which national tours were more sit down. So we did, our shortest stay in a city was 2 months. So it was nice. So you got a chance to kind of sit down, know the city, like, know where you were going, kind of make a little home base. So it was great. It was, we were in cities for at least, I'd say on average, at least 3 months, some cities we were in longer, like we were in Chicago for 6 months. We were in DC for like 5 months, Detroit for like 4 months. So, you got a chance to know the cities and, feel comfortable there, and feel like somewhat home for a little while at least, So, and the experience was nice because you're playing. Obviously, those tours, the national tours would carry like a core of musicians. So on our Les Mis tour, we carried basically a rhythm section and conductor minus the bass player. The rest of the orchestra we would pick up in the cities that we went to. On the bus and truck tours, they would carry a full orchestra with the Les Mis. We're trying to recall the Les Mis parts back then were like, I think maybe 24 pieces orchestra or something like that. So on the tour they would carry, and a bus and truck would be maybe a little bit more condensed because they would supplement the strings on keyboard. So they would carry maybe a couple of string players, but they would carry like maybe 20 musicians as opposed to the tour I was on. We would carry only 4. No, sorry, we would carry 5. That's counting the conductor. So keyboard 1, keyboard 2, guitar, drums, conductor. Yeah, so 5. So
did you come back to New York and start playing on shows after that, or what did you do after the tour?
Well, fortunately for me, after the tour, it was all kind of due to timing. So I went out on the Les Mis tour, Les Mis national tour. I was out on that tour for about 2.5 years. And while that tour was starting to wind down, a show called Miss Saigon was opening. And in Miss Saigon, they were going to use the drummer and percussionist who were playing the Les Mis Broadway version over in Miss Saigon. So the drummer and percussionist from Miss Saigon, from the Broadway version of Les Mis, left Les Mis to go play the Broadway version of Miss Saigon. Hence, I got a call since I was doing the tour of Les Mis to come in and be the drummer on the Broadway version of Les Mis. So timing was really, really good for me in that regard. And Les Mis ended up being a long-term gig for me, including the tour and the Broadway run. So I didn't come back to Broadway. I didn't actually come back from the tour subbing. I kind of came back from the tour with a gig, which was kind of really
great,
really a blessing.
So how long did you have that Les Mis gig?
So the Les Mis gig, I was on the Les Mis tour for about 2.5 years, and I did the rest of the Broadway run for 12 years. So total of about maybe 14.5 years of playing Les Mis.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I knew you did it for a while, but wow, that's amazing. So I met you when you were playing Les Mis. I can't remember when I met you, but I saw you play.
I remember you came, sat in the pit. I remember, yeah.
And I was scared to death.
Oh, stop.
Seriously, no, you were doing some stuff, and the odd time stuff, and you did one fill. I don't know what you did. I was like, holy cow, I'm not cut out for this. I just walked out like.
Oh, stop.
I'll never make it in this business. I'll never do it. No, but it was an eye-opening experience because shows are different from pit to pit, and just seeing what each drummer and each musician does. It's an incredible experience. I think I learned a lot just watching you and knowing your style and knowing that it's playing musicals is different from playing other types of gigs, and you have to it's a specialized skill, and you definitely are a specialist. top of the heap. So for 12 years on Broadway. Now the longest thing I've done was Memphis the Musical, and that was almost 3 years. I never got tired of playing my show. I loved every single minute of it. The producers were great, the musicians were great, the cast was great, the crew was great, the show was great. We won Tony Awards. I wouldn't trade anything. I'd still be doing it if it was still running. Did you ever get it to a point where you're like, my God, I have to go in again?
I never got to the point where, excuse me, I never got to the point where I didn't want to do it anymore. I will say after 12 years of doing something, the same thing over and over every night, I did get to points where I felt like a little like emotionally drained, or like, man, I'm playing the same thing every night, However, I did try to keep myself busy with other stuff, so when I could, I took off and I did other projects and I did other gigs and stuff. That helped. And then I looked at it from the standpoint of, listen, I have a gig. I have a gig that that not too many other people have. They don't have like long running shows. And I have a gig where I can, fortunately, take care of myself, take care of my family. And I looked at it from that standpoint. So when I got to those points where I was like, starting to feel like, oh man, this is a drag, and I never got to that point where it was, where I did feel that. But when I started feeling maybe those negative things coming on, I was like, listen, man, count your blessings, be thankful you have this gig. It's a long running gig. Not too many people have this. And other guys who were older than me helped me appreciate that and told me that. And where they say, hey, listen, we're grateful for what you have,
like William Devon.
Yeah.
Thankful for what you got.
Yeah. So I always tried to focus on, being grateful for what I had, and, even now I look at it because I mean, Les Mis was running. Les Mis, Phantom of the Opera opened up a year after Les Mis, and Phantom of the Opera is still running. And so sometimes I question myself. I'm like, man, if Les Mis was still running, would I still be playing it? Would I still have that? And there are people on the Phantom of the Opera run right now who are some of the original musicians. So
that's what I hear. I wonder.
Got to be grateful.
I never was really interested, nor did I ever get a chance to go see the show or see anyone in the pit.
Yeah.
But 30 years doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you keep it fresh, or how did you? Is it basically knowing that you had a gig and you were appreciative of what you had, and that's how you, or did you do anything else to try to maintain your sanity?
I would keep it fresh by, like what I said before, being grateful for what I had, being thankful for what I had. But I would also, to the extent that I could, I would try to throw in, I would try to deviate a little bit from the book, just a tad. I mean, you can't do on a show like that. You can't do much,
right.
And on any show, because people are expecting to hear certain things, certain cues. Oh, the drummer played this, he threw me off. You don't want to hear that. However, within reason, I would try to throw in little things that that would make it different for me. And there were some things, honestly, there were some things in the original Les Mis book, in the original Les Mis drum book, because Les Mis actually has been revived a few times, and I know the drum book has changed. But in the original drum book, there are some things in there that were every night was a challenge. To play only, not only drumming wise, but you're also playing in a group of 20, I think we're at 24, 25 musicians in a pit, and the rhythm section was not geographically together. So this was pre, in-ear monitors and stuff like that. So we had either headphones or hotspots. So in the setup for Les Mis at the theater, the drums were all the way in a corner next to the percussionist. The two keyboard players who you would want to kind of lock in with, they were kind of more in the middle of the pit. The bass player and the guitarist were on the other side of the pit. And in the middle of the pit, there was an elevator, which was part of what the cast used, because there was some scenes on stage where the cast would escape through what was called a sewer on the stage. So the cast a character had to go through the sewer, and so to make it look like he went through the sewer, they dug a hole in the stage, which ended up being a hole into the pit, which was where they would come out. So we had a lot of challenges in terms of playing, sometimes just playing together, because we had to rely on our phones or the hotspot that we had, and sometimes it would be like, oh, I'd rather just listen. So they were and some of the stuff was challenging. There was a song in there. There was a cue called "The Attack of Rue Plumet," which was every night, man. That was a real challenge to play. I mean, and we did it well, but it was, if you weren't on your P's and Q's, it was tough.
So being there for 12 years, you saw a transition in technology in the pit. Did you have a conductor cam by the time you ended? And did you have in-ears and your own Aviom? Like, how was the transition, or did you have a transition? Or
no. The only no, because at that point, Avioms were starting to come in, and people were starting to, do, conductor videos and stuff. But by that point, no, there was no transition. That was basically it is what it is. That's kind of the way you went into it, and that's kind of the way it ended up being.
Do you know if places like Phantom of the Opera are still operating on technology from 1987?
I don't know.
It'd be interesting to see what happens in the fall.
Yeah. That I don't know.
So after Les Mis, what was next for you?
So after Les Mis was a bunch of subbing.
What year is this, by the way?
This is around 2000. So Les Mis closed, the original Les Mis closed in May of 2003. And took a little bit of a break and then just got back into, networking and trying to sub. So I, started subbing Boy From Oz, Wicked. Actually, I was very fortunate right after subbing on Les Mis, after a little bit of a hiatus, to be able to start subbing on some long running shows. So Wicked, I subbed on for many years. Mamma Mia was running. I subbed on that for many years. Boy From Oz didn't last for too long, but I subbed on that for a little while. Spam-A-Lot was another one. And, I got some shows that had some legs to them. So I did fairly well at them subbing. So I was able to sub on those shows for a while. So I subbed on a bunch of shows. Next Broadway show I got was South Pacific.
Yeah.
Lincoln Center. Yeah. So I did that for a little bit.
Now, a question with regarding that. I like to share with people about doing readings and workshops. Did you do?
Oh, okay.
Did you do any readings that led to those shows or workshops?
I did whenever I've gotten hired, I've always gotten hired for stuff that was already kind of in the works to kind of come in, So the workshops I've done never have really led to any other shows, I recently actually just did a workshop recently that it's not going to be a Broadway show, but it was a show. It was a show kind of based on some Andrew Lloyd Webber music that is being planned for Norwegian Cruise Lines. So we did a workshop of that, and it has no Broadway aspirations at all. But the Broadway stuff I've done in terms of readings and workshops. So no, I haven't done any readings that have led to workshops, but I've been in workshop spaces where you're doing rehearsals for something coming in. So a lot of stuff that I've done has always had rehearsals in the workshop space, so to speak, but they were already, it was already booked for the theater it was going in, and that's what it was.
You mentioned the show Wicked. I remember a while ago, I think you said this, I don't know if it was you, but I've heard that Wicked is very, very difficult to play. Is that
Wicked is Wicked?
I've never heard the music. I've never seen the show. I don't know anything about it. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Is it really difficult to play, or is it what is it about the show that makes it so hard to play? Wicked, first of all, is difficult to play, but once you get it together, it's very fun to play. What makes it difficult is the amount of transitions between, I'll say, maybe between tempos and things you have to play. Like, not only are you playing drums, you're playing rhythmic stuff on the triangle, or rhythmic stuff on like a talking type drum, and you have to put that stuff down, and you have like about maybe two beats in a measure to get your sticks. I remember playing stuff at Wicked with my mallets underneath my arm while I'm playing. Oh, I'm sorry, with my sticks underneath my arm, playing with mallets, playing a cymbal roll, dropping the mallets, pulling my sticks out, and like within a beat or beat and a half, you have to be ready to play a fill into some other. It's a lot. I'll put it to you. It's a lot of choreography. It's a lot of choreography between pulling stuff up and pulling sticks out, beaters out, mallets out. Making sure it's a lot of transitions like that. That's what makes it tough. And then obviously there's a lot of, conductor watching, for stuff that's, groove oriented or tempo changes, and stuff comes in with click sometimes. And, so there's a lot of variables in there. So, but it's enjoyable once you get it together. So you went from Les Mis to subbing, and then you got South Pacific, and that I think you were doing that when I was doing Memphis.
Okay.
And after that, what was the next thing that came your way?
Okay, South Pacific then was a short little run of a show that didn't last. Was called Wonderland. That lasted for about maybe about rehearsals were about maybe 4 weeks, and then the run was about 4 weeks. So we were hoping to get some more legs out of it. Yeah, and then so the Wonderland. And then after Wonderland, did some more subbing, and then Evita. I did Evita for about a year and a half. A revival of that. That was nice. And then after Evita was a short revival of Jekyll and Hyde, which lasts for about another 4 weeks. And then a little bit of a hiatus for that. Well, some subbing. We subbed on some things together, I think, or same shows like Motown and stuff like that. Yeah. And then some more subbing on some different things. And then Cats revival came in. That was fun. Did that for about a year and a half, 2 years. 2 years did we get to? We got a year and a half out of that. So that was fun. Enjoyed that.
I remember subbing for you for Evita and at Cats, and it was two shows that were completely different from what I had done before. Because, you know, growing up playing groove-oriented music and then playing groove-oriented shows, whether it's Tick Tick Boom or Altar Boys or Memphis, you know, doing something in the Andrew Lloyd Webber vein is very, very different. And it took me a while. You talk about subbing and learning the show and going to see it. I had to go in a number of times. I like to spend at least a month learning the show, but it took me so long in order to get to certain things that you were doing. Again, I just admire your skill level and your the way you play and the things that you did. It actually helped me become a better player, especially with songs like "And the Money Kept Rolling In."
Rolling.
And I got
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Oh my God! I was like, do I have to play this? Can I just? Is there a funk show that's? Can we do a slave show? Anyway.
Slave show, right? Slave show in 7. How about that?
That would be hilarious. The thing about playing that song, though, you know, growing up playing along to Tom Sawyer, which is in 7,
yeah, right.
I was like, oh shit, it's just like Tom Sawyer. Let me just do that. So it kind of helped. So having that reference, but man, it was a lot of fun working on the show. And again, Cats was very interesting. I loved that little drum solo near the end.
At the end of the first act, yeah, that was fun.
I don't know how different it was from the original. Was that in the original Cats as well? Like that, was it a McCavity fight? Whatever the two cats.
Oh yeah, no. And in the original, some of the stuff in the Cats revival was new stuff that was arranged by John Clancy, fellow drummer that we both know. Yeah, great stuff. So John arranged some really fun stuff to play. So some of the stuff in the Cats revival was arranged by him, and since he's a drummer, it was fun to play that stuff. And so some of the stuff in the Cats revival, was not in the original. It was added. However, a lot of the stuff in the Cats revival was what it originally was. You know.
Did you see the Cats movie?
I'm trying to remember. Yeah,
Damn, must not be very memorable.
No, I don't think I did see the Cats movie. I don't think I watched, or I watched it, and You know what? I can't remember it. So maybe I didn't see it. So,
I got to tell you, I might be the only person out here that actually enjoyed it because it explained a lot that I didn't understand by seeing the show, a bunch of times. There's
yeah.
a lot of stuff that didn't make sense, but the movie tried to explain, but I don't want to get into that whole thing.
Right.
What are some of the things, and you've been around for a while, what are some of the things that drummers should never do in a Broadway pit?
Never do in a Broadway pit. Never do is to treat people disrespectfully. We live or we work in a world where, people need to feel comfortable. So never go in with a chip on your shoulder, and never think you're all that. Always be willing to listen to other players and respect their opinions. And never treat anybody disrespectfully, because it's not gonna benefit you. You're probably not going to be asked to come back there, and you just build up a bad reputation for yourself.
On the flip side, what are things that a drummer should always do?
On the flip side of that, treat people respectfully, but also as a drummer, watch the conductor. Watch the conductor, or I should say, as a drummer, you can't always watch the conductor because maybe you're focusing on your part, especially if you're subbing. But be aware, be in tune with the conductor in some way. Be aware of what's going on, and unless the show is like all on click, you have to be aware of what's going on. And even if the show is all on click, there are things that the conductor will do that will help you out. So know what's happening with the conductor in terms of what he wants. That will be, and make sure that he knows that you're kind of on his side.
What's the biggest piece of advice that you got over the years that has helped you in your career as a musician? Whether not necessarily musically, but in general, is there any, something that you'd like to pass on to other people? You know what, kid, what you need to know is
don't be late. Don't be late. And when I say late, I mean not late in terms of your downbeat. I mean late in terms of being at the gig. Like if the gig starts at 8, you're late if you arrive at 8, because that's what time the show starts. So be early. If the gig starts at 8, be there in time to, do what you need to do. Run through the show if you need to run through the show. If you need to, get used to the guy's setup, or get you warm. If it's your show, warm up for yourself. If you're taking a train there or a car there, whatever, make sure you're there. Make sure you do whatever you need to do so that you're ready to play, ready to perform at 8. Don't get there at 8. So yeah, that goes with any gig, and with any Broadway, with any gig. Make sure you're ready to do what you need to do when you need to do it.
Now, a couple more questions, but speaking of being late, I don't know if everyone has experienced this, but being on a show for a long time and living in and around New York City, there are certain things that you can't control. You're gonna get there at 7:15 for 8 o'clock show or 7:30. Have you ever gotten a situation where you're like, I'll get there? You leave at say 6:30, and you normally get there at 7:15, but man, something's happened and it's like 7:14, 7:30. You're like, oh my God. How many has that happened a lot to you, and what has been your craziest close call?
It hasn't happened a lot to me. I usually try to leave myself enough time. Especially if I'm doing a Broadway thing, I usually try to be there probably an hour before showtime for me is kind of not comfortable. I try to get there like maybe an hour and a half, you know.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. An hour is okay, you know. But you know, warm up, whatever, you know. I want to make sure I'm there. And yes, I have, you know, we've all kind of, you know, been in situations like that. When I was doing the original Les Mis, you know, I lived on Long Island, and I had a train that I would, same train, I would take the same train. It would get into Penn Station at 7:20 on the dot every day. Or on a matinee day, it was 1:20. Matinee starts at 2. So plenty of time to get up to Penn Station. That was comfortable for me. One day, and it happened 2 Wednesdays in a row, there was train issues, and I'm sitting in the tunnel between Penn Station and Queens. I'm sitting in the tunnel, and it's like I want to say it's 1:45, 1:50. I'm like, oh man. I said, I am totally done. So long story short, we got through. I ran out. I was thinking so much. I was like, I said, is there any way I can like walk from here, like on the track? And they said, no, you can't do that. I'm like, oh my God, it's because I was just freaking out. Anyway, long story short, we pulled in. I was able to run upstairs. I hopped in a cab on 8th Avenue for like 6 blocks, and we got to 42nd Street at bottlenecked. I gave the guy $10. I ran out. I got to the theater. Thankfully, I made it on time. I mean, I made it to the theater before, because sometimes in those times, sometimes 2:00 curtain sometimes the show actually wouldn't start maybe to like 2:05, 2:06. So I had a little bit of play, but wasn't what I was hoping for, wanted to do. And So yeah, I've been in situations like that, but yeah. And then I said to myself, listen, I need to leave a little bit earlier. And so just learning from those experiences and priding myself on not being late, but, you know, making sure that I'm not, you know, making sure I'm there on time.
That's great advice, though. Don't be late and get there early.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the older that I've gotten, the more cautious I've become.
Yep. Me
and
too.
I realized that, you know, even recently playing these club dates, I get there like an hour before, and I feel so much better being there at 7:00. First of all, you know, doing club dates, setting up your drums, just having it set up. It's set up by 7:30, so you got time to just chill. It's so much better.
Exactly.
So, going back to your beginnings, are you into computer science at all? Did you study any kind of languages? Are you into technology now, or that's, you know, just put that in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still into technology. I mean, I work in Pro Tools. I have used my computer knowledge, but more in a musical kind of way. And I feel comfortable on using programs and stuff like that. The languages I learned when I was in college,
Fortran.
Oh wow, woo, Clayton, Fortran. Yeah, I took 2. That was my first semester of computer languages. Fortran,
COBOL,
and my second semester was advanced Fortran. Yep, Fortran.
C++ around.
I remember we used a language called COBOL.
Yes,
a language called assembly language. Yeah, a lot of that stuff is not around anymore. So, but my experience with computers and how they, you know, being comfortable in the computer world has helped me, you know, with, you know, let's say like Pro Tools or doing things on the computer, musical things on the computer, you know, plugins and all that stuff. So just overall has helped me. So.
Did Broadway lead to any kind of endorsement deals with you?
Yes and no. Broadway, I would say Broadway didn't lead to them. Broadway helped in me getting them because I actually pursued them. So I'm with Remo, I'm with Paiste, I'm with Vic Firth. But they didn't approach me. I approached them, and I would say it's because it was when I was on the first national tour of Les Mis that I got those deals. It was because that was a big thing on the resume to put, and it was because of that helped me get those, and I've been very happy with all three of those companies. They've been very supportive of me, and whenever I needed something, they've done it. Firth made some specialty sticks I used for many years at Les Mis. Paiste initially loaned me a pair of orchestral crash cymbals that I used at South Pacific, and then when I went to go give them back, they said, "Well, you earned your keep with them. You can keep them." I was like, "Wow, it's great." Remo's been great with me over the years with lots of stuff. They've all been very supportive and very great. So.
If people wanted to reach out to you to get lessons, do you have a website?
I don't have a website.
Social media?
Social media. I'm not a social media guy either, but BillLanham@AOL.com is my email address. You can reach me there.
All right. Do you ever think that, man, did you ever look back and say, I wish I had done the computer science thing, or just say, you know what, I made the right choice in pursuing music?
No, never looked back on it. And it's funny, you made me hesitate because I had to think about it one time, because in my sophomore year of high school, I was involved in this. I'm sorry, sophomore year of college, I was with this program that was pushing students to go on job interviews and get experience. So it was basically for seniors and juniors, but since I was doing well in school and I was a computer science student, they put me in this program, and they got me this interview with the IRS, and back in the 80s, and their location was out in Holbrook back then. So they sent me on this interview, and they had told me, I said, listen, they're really looking for sophomores. They're looking for juniors and seniors. So you're a sophomore, so they're probably not going to offer you the job, but just go on the interview for experience. I was like, all right, meanwhile, I was gigging, I was doing shows, and I was doing club dates, and I was doing all this other stuff, So they're interviewing me and I was so not into doing the computer thing back then. And so they were interviewing me. So Mr. Lanham, blah, 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 so what are your plans for the summer? What do you, how you think, what are you going to bring to us? I said, well, I got some gigs lined up with some shows and my band and stuff. So, I don't know what, I'll try to fit in what you have for me, around my schedule. And I was like, oh my goodness. I said that at an IRS interview. I mean, that just like showed them how non-interested I was in doing computer science and pursuing music.
And they wanted to hire you, or they were like, nah.
No. When I left, I was like, oh, when I left, I was like, oh, well, I'm probably not getting that gig. And now as an older person, I'm looking back, I'm like, man, what an idiot I was. How rude I was.
I think you obviously made the right choice. You are a wildly successful musician, and
I don't know about that.
Well, seriously, you've done so much in your life, and I definitely admire the things that you've accomplished, and I love your drumming, and you're definitely an inspiration to me. I'd like to, I'd love to have a job that lasts for 14 years or 12 years on Broadway. But, I really appreciate the opportunities that you've given me over the years, and
vice versa too, because you've done things for me too. So that goes back to you, and your playing has been inspirational to me as well too. So,
thank you, man.
Kudos to you. Yep.
But thank you for joining me on the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Bill Lanham, and I will be talking to you soon, Mr. Lanham.
All right.
Thanks again.
You got it.